Hello, and welcome to the SharePoint Framework and Viva Connections bi-weekly sync. It is March 24th, 2022. I'm your host on this call, Patrick Rodgers. Want to again say our thoughts are with those in Ukraine, our friends and community members and everyone. We really hope we can get to some kind of a resolution in that situation soon, but our thoughts are with you all. Stay safe. Agenda for this week's call is going to be latest updates on SharePoint Framework, patterns and practices, updates across the program, new community samples, picture time with Together Mode, and we've got 3 great demos again from Greg, Alexander, and Paolo. So we'll start with creating a workflow engine within SharePoint Framework, a timely subject, Docker Loves SharePoint Framework, and then we'll finish up with using third-party APIs in Viva Connections ACEs or adaptive card extensions. But let's jump right into some of our quick program updates. So we've got opportunities to participate in the program. So you can always jump in and demo. You've got a link in the bottom right corner of this slide on how to sign up for a demo. We are booked out for a few months now, which is great, but don't be discouraged. We will get you demoing. We will get you a slot. It just might not be right away, but would love to see all the great work you are doing for your customers and your companies out there. And so please reach out and schedule a demo. Would love to get you featured. As well, you can contribute on GitHub across all of our many repositories. That could take the form of reporting issues, submitting pull requests, or helping others with their issues and questions as well. And then finally, we always appreciate feedback about the program and ways to, we could do better or things you like, and maybe we could do a little bit more of those. Jumping now into all of the different ways to get involved in the program, the only link you really need to remember is aka.ms/m365pnp. Boy, we are still animation heavy. So M365 developer videos is that first section. Those are going to be topic focused videos on how to get started doing various things, adaptive card extensions, SharePoint Framework web parts, calling the Microsoft Graph. Our community videos are going to be recordings of our various community calls, such as this one and all our other calls. So if you miss one or just want to catch up on something you heard previously, please do check those out. As well, we've got tons of great open source repositories, all of which are interested in your participation and feedback. So participate in as many or as few of those as you have time and interest to do, but you are welcome across all of them for SharePoint, PnP, Office Dev, and Microsoft Graph. As well, tons and tons of great samples to help you get your project started or see how other folks have solved similar problems. Team samples, SPFx web parts, SPFx ACEs, Power Platform samples, SPFx extensions, and list formatting. Again, ak.ms/m365pnp to get all those samples. M365 developer community calls. We've moved this slide up just to make the ending a little bit cleaner, but also to highlight all these other calls that are available to you across the various topics. Again, if you can't make it, the recordings will be available, but these are links to get invites to all of those calls, and those as well can be found at ak.ms/m365pnp. We've got as well our Tuesday calls, or the Microsoft 365 platform calls. These are hosted by folks from Microsoft across various areas in engineering. And next week, we've got Sean Squires, some updates around syntax testing easy with new templates. We've got me doing a managed state across ACEs demonstration. So that's going to be extending this series we've been doing around state and ACEs and understanding that. And then Seb will be back introducing some new Microsoft Graph Toolkit samples, specifically about the sample gallery, So very excited to see that update from Sean and Seb, and of course, myself as well, I guess. Download that invite at ak.ms/m365-dev-call, and we look forward to talking to you next Tuesday. And we will now go to David for Sharing is Caring.
Awesome. Thank you, Patrick. Well, friends, as you saw, all those resources, all those samples are made possible by amazing community contributors such as yourself. But we understand there may be times that prevent you from getting involved. If you're new to the community or new to some of the technologies such as GitHub, Sharing is Caring is a program that is here to provide you hands-on guidance that we are going to work alongside with you so you feel comfortable contributing. Making your first pull request, we got you. You want to present on one of these calls, as Patrick had mentioned, we're going to provide you some tips and some guidance. These are safe space opportunities for you to ask any and all questions. We don't record them, and they're wonderful opportunities to collaborate with other members of the community. Coming up in April is another Ask Me Anything on Viva Connections extensibility with Luca, Pat, and John. So look out for that being scheduled in the next few days, and definitely register. Again, just be a little patient with us as we get the dates set up over the next month or two. It's conference season and some job changes and everything, so the schedules are a little crazy. But we appreciate your patience and look forward to collaborating with you. Now, once you have contributed, we want to celebrate all the amazing work you're doing with our PNP recognition program. This is a formal and official way to recognize and celebrate the work you're doing, powered by Credly. Yes, the same Credly that manages all the Microsoft certification badges. They are associated to your LinkedIn profile, shareable on Twitter. Put them on your website, add them to your resume. It is a great way to be recognized for the work you're doing, and we cannot appreciate enough all and everything that you're doing. We do need you to opt in so that we can tie your GitHub account to an email address that you would like associated to your Credly account, so aka.ms/m365pnp-recognition. Patrick, back to you.
Awesome. Thanks, David, for that great update. And now we'll go to Vesa with updates around the SharePoint framework.
So quick update on the numbers without showing exact numbers, but the growth has been really awesome during the spring again. We're a bit slowing down again on the previous weeks, but still targeting the highest ever daily usage actually this week, Tuesday. So there is millions and millions and millions of users on a daily basis using extensibility built with SPFx. So really cool to see this growth within the past years. Quick update on the roadmap side of the house. So not that many updates in here, but we have the 1.15 beta already out. Current ETA on that one is June 2022, and focus areas will be, of course, on the Viva Connection side of the house, as we're seeing more and more gradual adoption of that, which is natural. It takes always a while for people to start using things until they see the GA release happening. And then there's a really cool thing for classical ask for SPFx, which is overriding of the new and edit and view experiences in the list and library forms. And that's coming up in this 1.15 release as well. And a lot of kind of a technical updates. So coming up with updating to TypeScript 4, updating to Node 16, and updating the latest Teams SDKs and all of that stuff as well. So a lot of investments on there. Now, the last thing on the slide is just pointing out on something which will most likely go to the beta in 1.15, which is bot-driven adaptive card extension. So you can actually create a bot in the future, which is set to be actually providing adaptive cards and reacting to adaptive cards in the Viva Connection side. So it's cool to see all of the technologies getting more integrated between each other across the stack. But that's it, quick update from the engineering side around this. So let's move to a next slide. I guess it's you, Patrick, or Julie.
I guess it is. Thanks for that update, Vesa. Very excited to see the stuff coming to 1.15. A lot of long-awaited features for folks. That's going to be a really great update to get out there. And Julie was having some technical trouble. I'm going to glance. I don't hear her. So I'm going to go ahead real quick and just cover our PNP.js client-side updates. We did publish a version 2.13 released on March 11th that had a fix. Those fixes now for V2 are going to come from community-submitted PRs. We are not doing any LTS for V2. It's just we don't have the team to really support that right now. But if you find something and want to submit a pull request for V2, happy to merge that and get that out in a future release. We did also release version 3.1 on March 11th. Got some docs updates in there. Working on this ESM stuff for Node. Working through that. There's an open issue there. I know that's another friction point with this new release we're working through. Fix some bugs. And then as well, want to remind folks, don't forget about our nightly build. So we've got npm install at pnp/sp at v3 nightly. And that will get you the latest updates built each evening. So if there's something we've added, you have submitted a bug perhaps, and we've got it fixed, but we haven't yet to do a release, you could try it as soon as the next day. So encourage you to check those out, and we'll look to keep going with those nightly builds. So if you have any questions there, please check that out. Links there to our docs. Follow us M365PNPJS on Twitter. And thanks everybody for all the great feedback around the V3 release. And now moving on to CLI for Microsoft 365, we've got a new preview version v5.1 out with validating SharePoint Framework projects, downloading Teams app packages, improving SPFX projects, automatic copy device code support, and removed some commands that are obsolete for one of the communication APIs. You can install that preview API there using the @next version target, and then some release notes there. You follow the link at the bottom. So definitely check out the CLI as well, available natively in the Azure Cloud Shell as a reminder. So very easy to grab that, use it, and get your projects nice and standardized around setup and configuration and maintenance. Next up is the reusable components. So we've got two sets of reusable components. The first, React Controls, currently at 3.7.2, is going to give you controls for use within the body of your web parts, and application extensions for the React Controls there will get you a nice jump start into your project, and as well the React Property Controls 3.6.0 will get you stuff for the editor pane of your web parts, allowing you to get a very great out-of-the-box appearing experience with a lot of great reusable controls to make your solutions really pop very quickly. So more information there at the two links on the bottom, sp-dev-fx-property-controls, and then sp-dev-fx-controls-react. So check those out. Great way to get your project going quickly. And finally, we got our update on modern search. You can always go to ak.ms/pnp-search for the latest. Building modern search experiences with flexible web parts. We did the February 2022 release, which is 4.5.4, and then we had a December 2021 release of 3.23. Remember that V3 branch is sort of in maintenance mode only at this point, and if you can or when you're able, upgrade your projects and your sites and customers to use the version 4 branch of things. That's where all the updates and new features are going, so I encourage you to check that out. And next up is going to be Hugo with an update around our samples.
Patrick. So we have two repos where we store lots of samples. One around SPFX extensions at aka.ms SPFX-extensions, and one for web parts at SPFX-webparts. And so these are the updates since our last update. The first one is a upgrade to SPFX 1.12 on the Application Insights Advanced extension by Sudhar Sen. And on the web part side, we have a whole bunch of new web parts. One is a web part by Sandeep Dev 365. Again, mean parents that gave him this name. But we have a hide list web part, which actually uses a documented approach to hide or show lists. And you could normally do this with PowerShell, REST API, or Power Automate, but now you have a web part that you can use to do the same thing. We have an update by Anup Tati on the cascading managed metadata using Graph API. We now use SPFX 1.14. We have a new frequently asked question property field collection metadata web part. It's one of the many FAQ web parts that we have, but this one uses property field collections. And thanks to Arun Kumar Perumal for this update. We have a new adaptive card host control that uses the PNP adaptive card host control. And so now we have at least 3 samples in there that shows how to use adaptive cards within SPFX. 2 of them that build it from scratch, and this third one which actually uses the PNP control. Moving forward, I would recommend you use the PNP control because there's a lot of awesome work that's being done. So thank you, Fabio, for this update. We have a new cherry-picked content by Christophe. Cherry-pick content, if you remember the good old content editor web part, one of the reasons why this web part is not as readily available in the current platform is that it was easy for anyone to go in and put some script in there that could have malicious results. So Christophe's brilliant idea was, what if we had the same web part, but the only way to call script would be if the script have come from an approved source of scripts, a library or libraries that allows you to curate the list of scripts that you can use. And that's really what this web part does. Omar El Anis has updated the hero web part. I love this because some users requested the option to add a collage of images using a flex grid layout. So he's added that. He's added things like placeholders, some issues with web part not loading, more maintenance on unused imports and things like that, and better CSS and updating author information if in case there's issues. The quick poll web part by Niels has been upgraded to 1.13. Company Stories by Luis Manes has been upgraded to SPFX 1.14 and uses the latest MGT. There's a few shout outs too as well that I wanted to do. Denis Molotov has actually done over 10 pull requests to add dev containers to some of the web parts that didn't have dev containers. So if I just listed the updates, there would be a page dedicated to Denis here. But I also wanted to thank Abderrahman Mujahid, who is constantly contributing to the issues and helping people solve issues. Again, every contribution matters. It's not just about creating new samples or updating samples. Helping people out is a great way to contribute. So thank you to that. And with that in mind, Milan Holmans has actually started helping out as well in the issues. And thank you for jumping in and helping people. We appreciate your work. If you want to contribute, please go to these repositories. We accept contributions and we welcome everybody's feedback. Thank you, Patrick, and back to my friend David.
Yes, thank you. We have one new ACE this week from Siddharth on dynamic announcements. It uses card view and quick view, and it allows you to drive those announcements dynamically from a SharePoint list. So it's very, very cool. Siddharth, thank you. Still open for more contributions. And again, we're going to be having our Viva Connections adaptive card extensions, sharing is caring coming up soon with the conference season and all that. It's just a little crazy, but we are wrapping it up and it's going to be awesome. So be on the lookout for that. Patrick, back to you.
Thank you, David. Thank you, Hugo, for those great updates. And now we'll go to Vesa for optional picture time.
Yay, let me share my screen. And it is that screen most likely. I was practicing with my full screen setup, so it's hard to know which of them to share. I think we got the right one. Let's wait for the 15 seats to fill in. It would be really cool to have a 200 people at some point in this. I know that it's coming sooner or later, but I don't know when. Let's wait a while still. Let's wait a while. Let's wait a while. Let's wait a while. Still a few more seats in the room. Yes, I guess that's the last row which will fill in. What is that in the second row? What is that green thing? It's actually not rendering properly. I will put the recording on. Wait. And I will then grab the waving of hands in there. I think we're full completely in here. Let's do some hand waving, everybody. Thank you once again joining in here. Awesome to see familiar faces and people who join on this Together Mode things also every single week. So welcome. Thank you. And AC, I saw that face. Thank you. Thanks, everybody. Awesome. Great to have you in this community. Thanks, Patrick. Take it away.
All right. With that, we will hop over and start our first demo, which is going to be with Greg Hitchon, creating a workflow engine with SharePoint Framework. Greg, if you want to go ahead and take over the presentation.
Sure, will do. My name is Greg Hitchon. I am a software developer of an engineering company in Canada, and we have been working on a workflow engine to do a variety of things. And that includes, basically we want to solve technical problems as well as business-related problems, and we need to support human interaction, so task-based work, access to protected resources, so accessing the graph, creating files, deleting files, whatever. And some key goals we had here was to have both a hybrid workflow where we could have low code by default and then drop into more of a code-based solution where required, and then also hybrid form. So have a ability to have a simple low code form and then drop into a more complex form where required. So some examples of these problems are creating technical reports, business side like a vacation request, onboarding process, and some existing products to this be like temporal.io, some BPMN type engines, Intex, Power Automate. So all of these are great solutions. And as is classic in software development, we were like, you know what, we're going to do something different. So, but we didn't rebuild, any of these. So how did we do this? Basically, our stack here from the UI side, all this is very Microsoft centric. So using SPFx React for the UI, basically building a little website inside of SharePoint, Fluent UI, PnP stuff, using React Query and React Router for our data and API call management, and then React Router for our navigation. And form-wise, we have the adaptive cards we're using for our low-code solution to forms, and then React Hook Form is just a library within React, and we're using that for our more complex forms. And for workflows, we're using XState, which is shifted over, like they created a new company, Stately, and they're doing all sorts of good stuff there in the last year or so for our low code, and then durable functions for our more complex stuff. And then data access, we're using ASP.NET Core, OData API. So that's basically it. And then within SharePoint Framework, we've been working on this since the early days of SPFx, but lately, with the improvements in, React has hooks and all this stuff, it's been beneficial. We've found like the React faster stuff is really helps in a workflow when you have a more complicated web part. So since the early days, the whole stack has gotten a lot nicer, and we have like the CI/CD stuff. So everything is at this point fairly clean. So let's do a demo. So what does this look like? So we have a couple of just simple demos here. So this is just an app page that we have. And this is a generic sort of list that has configured for different entities. So these are very similar. There's some changes in the naming and stuff, which is configurable. And basically when we create a new app, just can reuse a lot of this, and it's just a very generic thing. So what does this do? So to create, so this is example is just for a document review request, but really it's just a sample. There's not much in this workflow, but this form is customized. So you can have any inputs you want into this. So we're going to submit this document. So let's say I'm, a person submitting some document for request or for review. I might have some additional fields here. This then will populate, and what's happening in the background here is just some API calls, and then XState is running, getting some events, persisting some state, and then durable functions is also kicking in to create some records in a database. So we can look at this, and we've created a task. So all this stuff is just task based. So we've created a task, has some properties, and what we also should get here is an email. So this email is using a 1-4 adaptive cards, and so here we have some simple inputs. We can see there's some validation here. So one of the nice things about 1-4 adaptive cards is you have this validation, which is blessed, and you don't have to worry about sending it back to the server and then adjusting and then sending it back, which was a pain. So we get this card with this task that we can fill out directly in the email, and then we also have within SharePoint we can see we render the same card. So basically this is just again sort of a hybrid approach where if we're working within SharePoint or Teams for that matter, we can just fill this in directly. We don't have to recode another form for the different environments. So we can submit this. So you can submit this from within SharePoint, and there's a bit of a difference with 1-4 in terms of the updating, which still haven't figured out cleanly. If you want to return like a refresh card, it refreshes once automatically, and so if there is a lag in between, like when the data is getting updated, this won't get updated right away. So once it does, though, we get this refresh card, and we can see our comments here. And then also here, if we refresh from within SharePoint, obviously we see the same comments. And then this workflow is gonna update in status. It's gonna be complete, whatever. So that's kind of an example of using the low code form approach. And then this start card. So this is more of a business process that we're actually using. So we can add in, some photos and a bunch of data. And this again, this is something that you can't do in adaptive cards right now, for instance, like upload a file. So we can't do this directly in the email. So we need to drop into like React, hook forms you could do any framework, but we have to drop into SPFx to do this. And so here there's no tasks within this little workflow. Basically all we're expecting here is for this card to get submitted. And then once this workflow completes, it'll just send us an email with that PDF of that card. So if we look at the workflow here, You can see this has completed. And if we go in and look at it, we can see some of the data that we've submitted, and then we get a message here with like a PDF. And this is happening in the durable functions world, where we're taking that data, generating a PDF in like an async fashion, and then once that's completed, we're sending this email. So obviously here, these are very simple workflows, but we have a number of them that are also quite complex, lots of approval stuff. You can have drop downs, approve, reject, all this stuff. And yeah, so that is that. And let's take a quick look at some of what some of this code looks like. So for instance, this code is for that start card submission that we just did. So you can see it's pretty simple. So we've abstracted some of the complexity of the form stuff and just put it into these text inputs. So basically we can spin up like a simple form for grabbing some data pretty quickly. Like there's not a whole lot going on here. And then this just drops into that generic sort of framework. In terms of the low code stuff, so this is similarly what this looks like in the adaptive cards world. So you can see there's some error handling, and we have just like a JSON type schema. We could also just design this in the designer. So this is something that is a lot easier to design because you have a visual designer, and then you can tweak it a little bit for any customizations. And then in terms of the workflow, so XState looks something like this. Again, it's JSON, and there is an editor now live for XState. So there's a visual editor that you can scaffold out your workflows in, and then convert them into or drop in little snippets into your actual code base. And so this invoke is invoking an API call basically, which then kicks off some additional work. And this is the sort of code side of the workflow. So this is C#. This is in durable functions. And you can see here, this is just a sample example where you get some data from a task. So you wait for some event, get in some input from an email, for instance, and then if you can do anything. So if you wanted to do some specific thing in code that you didn't want to or couldn't handle in the JSON sort of stuff, then you can do any kind of logic you want here, and then take any kind of action. So this is all in C#. So for creating PDFs or like accessing some data, I mean, it's all very, very straightforward, and there's a lot of resources around that. So that is pretty much it. One other thing that is of interest is this details list. So this is something that took a while to get right. And the details list in Fluent UI is a pretty beastly thing. There's a lot going on in terms of configuration. So one thing that was useful early on, and I would definitely suggest doing, is we created a wrapper, and then we created another wrapper on top of this wrapper actually to abstract away some of that complexity. So where you have some of these lists, all of these are using that list, and you can have some different views and stuff like that, and different search and refresh and whatnot. So this list component was pretty useful in terms of just putting together a UI that made sense. Yeah, and that's pretty much it. So that is and yeah, that's all. So stay happy, stay beautiful, and thank you for watching and listening.
Thanks, Greg. Great stuff. Exciting to see that demo. Thanks for coming and sharing it with us. Really neat use of a lot of different techniques there. So I hope folks can check that out. And now we're going to move over to Alexander for a Docker Loves SharePoint Framework demo.
Yes, great. Let me share my slides here. You can see them now.
I've got it. Take it away.
Great. Yes, my name is Alex, and I'm going to tell a little bit about the containers and how you can make even greater experiences on such platforms as SharePoint, Viva, and Teams, etc. Whatever platform you're delivering to using SPFx framework. But let me get started with just a usual case. For example, I'm asked to join in some project and to fix some bug or improve some features. So what I'm usually do. I'm cloning a project like this. Then I'm going inside and look in the structure. I can see that it's just a normal fixed structure. So node modules are not installed. So I run npm install like this. But hey, I don't have any npm on this machine. And I don't have Node.js on my machine. The reason why I don't have it, there are a few reasons. First, I pursue consistency. So whatever version we used for production, for building and shipping production, I want to have the very same version for every developer in a team. And that means if I work for many different projects, I need to have a different versions. I need to use different versions on my laptop. And of course, you can solve it with such a tool as NVM. But I'm involved in many other projects, not just Node.js and SPFx. I work with Python and Terraform and PNP PowerShell. So I don't want to just have a niche solution for this consistency. I want to have a generic solution that I can use for any technology that I work with. Second part is clarity. It means that I don't want to always keep in mind what dependencies are I already installed on this laptop and what dependencies are not installed. I have pretty few laptops, believe me, and I work with pretty few projects at the same time. So I don't want to always keep this picture in mind. I want to focus on some more exciting things. And the last but not least is a security aspect. It means that when I run run a code from a repository, I don't want to even spend time on considering whether this code is trusted, whether it is mature and safe to run. I just want to run it in kind of isolated way, so it cannot affect my laptop and cannot affect other repositories that I have on my laptop. And of course, I work for many different customers, and I don't want to expose repositories kind of between each other. So to address that, if you put these demands into extremum, you could use some virtualization, of course. You can create a virtual environment, for example, a virtual machine for each project. Every developer will have a dedicated virtual machine for every project. And for example, those developers who work with the so-called IT assistant project, they will have this virtual machine, or they will have the very same virtual machines with the same software. We could create a template of this virtual machine, right? We could verify this template, and then we could distribute this virtual machine across all developers, and they will have a very consistent experience, very same version of Node.js and npm, and whatever dependencies are necessary for this particular project. And if we work with a few projects, then we could use a few virtual machines. That is totally viable. I work a lot with SharePoint on-premise, and I know that, we deliver such projects for SharePoint on-premise where we develop on virtual machines, and we automate preparing images for virtual machines. We automate provisioning. So this is all automatable, no worries. But still, virtual machines are quite heavy. And even for running SPFx, you will need about 10 gigabytes of disk for this virtual machine. You will need about 4 gigabytes of RAM, etc. And even if you automate everything completely, you will still there will be still some inconvenient situation for developers when they want to expose the machine or refresh it, or even start and shut down. So this is not optimal, really. Even if you invest in development and in this environment, there will be still some not satisfaction from the developers. what we suggest instead is using containers, which is another way of virtualization. So it has the same idea of virtualization as virtual machines, but it's just a bit different. Okay, so you still can create so-called container images, and you can pre-install software there. For example, you can install, you can use Linux with a specific version, Node.js and NPM, etc. And then from this image, you could create containers. So these are also virtualized environments. Again, they're similar to virtual machines, but a bit different. Okay, maybe enough talking. Let me show you how it works, and you will see by yourself. So from here, from this folder, I'm opening the same project in GitHub, the same as we just cloned. And here is the guide. So I just need to run a few commands here. First, to assign some permissions, and I need to put my sudo password here. And the second line is actually starting Docker. So for running this command, I need Docker to be installed on my machine. And the point is, Docker is the only what I need to have installed on my machine. When I work with SharePoint, when I work with Python, when I work with Golang, I don't install anything. I'll just use Docker, and that's the only thing I have. Okay, so I run it, and boom, it's created already. So right now, with just one line, I created a virtual environment on my machine, and it's up and running. I have NPM on this environment already. And if we look, for example, what happens behind the scene, I run stats, and I see this container is just taking about 8 megabytes of memory. What do you say about that? So this is a virtual environment, isolated with pre-installed software. It just requires 8 megabytes for running it. All right, so let's go further, and I will go on and install the modules. And as it will be installing, let me go back to slides and tell you a bit more about this command that we just run. So we told Docker to create this environment. We told it to map my directory that I have locally on my laptop. We map it to a virtual directory that there is on a virtual disk space on this container. So when I run a command in this container, it will work with my files, with my SharePoint framework files, just not even understanding that it is really working remotely. So that's what we did here. And then we say we need to expose 2 ports, which we need for Chrome or a browser to work with. And we need to create this container from this image. I hope you can see it well. But the image is SPFx image that is promoted or offered by PNP community. So PNP community is maintaining this image of the Docker, and we use it. All right, let's get back here. So it installed modules. It created SSL certificate. Now I need to run gulp serve. The only thing remaining is that the certificate was created inside this virtual environment. But since I will be using a browser on my real laptop, I will run this snippet and install the certificate on my laptop. Here you go. So now everything is up and running, and I can just go ahead, open Workbench, and add web part and start contributing. So you see, I didn't have to install any additional software. I came to the project just having Docker on board, and I started contributing already. I can go and fix, debug. Okay, what do I do here? I go. Let me open this project in Visual Studio. Like this. And for example, I want to change some parameter here. Like I want this password that is generated by this web part. I want it twice longer. That's what I was told by my project manager. Leave update is working, or maybe not working. Let's refresh it. Yeah, now we have it twice longer. So that is it. That was easy, but you may think, well, yeah, I'm a SharePoint developer. I'm already demanded. Why should I spend time on learning this Docker fancy things? And maybe you're right. Maybe you don't have to. If someone prepares the project for running, for example, in CodeSpace, which is a fancy technology, a fancy feature of GitHub. Here, this is another example. You can just use, you can run this container somewhere in the cloud. Before we do that, let me close this container that I run. So I just type exit, and now we don't have any containers running at all. You see, it was easy. Create it like this, and then when you exit, it's just removed. It's disposable and very lightweight. You don't need to wait until it starts and shut down. All right, so this project is prepared for CodeSpaces, and I go like this. I start the CodeSpace. This is a container that will be running in a GitHub data center. So from this, I want to connect to Visual Studio. Open Visual Studio Code. Great. From here, I just want to run, creating a new certificate. And I have modules installed before because I used this workplace or CodeSpace yesterday, so it's still holding my files here. I don't need to install again. All right, and now I run gulp serve no browser. And let's check that we don't have any containers running on my laptop, so I don't have to install any Docker or anything on my laptop to be able to develop in this solution. So I just go with Visual Studio and say, okay, GitHub, run this container for me. And then it's just running. Now it's running, and I need to run the same snippet for handling certificates on my browser. And we should be good to go. Let's try it out. Here you go. You see, that's the future. So I don't have anything more to present right now. And I will appreciate all the questions if you put them in the chat. I will be glad to answer them. Back to you, Patrick.
Great work. Thank you, Alex, for that. Really exciting to see more and more use of Docker and these containers across the different PnP solutions and across the different methods of doing development. Really cool stuff. I need something that I could personally learn a lot more about. So it's exciting to see these demos come in and really motivates me to learn more. And for our final demo today, we're going to move over to Paolo around using third-party APIs and Viva Connections adaptive card extensions. Paolo, take it away.
Yes, thank you, Patrick, and welcome to this short demo about how to consume third-party APIs in Viva Connections. Like usual, let me share a few technical things, and then I will move to the demo environment. So just to set the context, here we're going to see how we can consume a third-party API or a custom API, which can be something built with an Azure function or an ASP.NET REST API or whatever else you like. We simply need to register the API as an Azure Active Directory application in the target Azure AD tenant, and we need to expose an API, and we will see how to do that. Once you've done that, you need to configure in the package solution JSON file of your SPFx solution, because an adaptive card extension at the very end is just an SPFx solution. You will have to configure the Web API permission request section to declare what kind of permissions you need to consume the target API. You will eventually have to consent your application in a target tenant if you are creating a multi-tenant solution. And then you will have to grant the permissions to consume that API, and you will be ready to use the AAD HTTP client that we have in SPFx in order to consume the API and show the output in a card view or in a quick view. So rather than talking, let me show you what I mean in practice. So I will start showing you an actual demo ACE, which is simply based on the idea of showing a set of stock values. And don't be scared, these are fake values. So don't jump on your chair if it is higher or lower than what is actually the current value of any of these stocks. This is just based on a fake list of stocks. So it is close to today's values, but not exactly the current values. This is an adaptive card extension running right now in the workbench. And if I click on edit, we can see that it has been configured in order to consume an external quote service, which is a fake one that I created for the sake of this demo. And I'm providing right here as a setting a comma separated list of stock symbols that I want to get through my API. So how can we create such an adaptive card extension? How can we create the backend API in order to make it possible to create such kind of solution? So first of all, let me show you the SharePoint Framework solution. So here we are in the adaptive card extension, and this is a very simple adaptive card extension in which in the onInit method, I simply configure the state of the ACE. And in fact, in my state, I simply keep track of the current symbol, current quote, and the trend up or down for the current quote. Then we have in the onInit method the initialization of the state, and we create an instance of an AAD HTTP client object that we have in SPFx, and as such we have it in adaptive card extensions as well. And I simply get an instance through the AAD HTTP client factory of an HTTP client, AAD HTTP client, for a specific target API, which will be identified by the unique URI of my API as it was registered in Azure Active Directory. And we will come back to this value later on in this demo. Once I have my client, AAD HTTP client instance, I can simply load the quotes for my stocks simply using a custom method that I defined, the load quote one, which will execute asynchronously to speed up the initialization process of my ACE. And as such, in half a second, I will start loading quotes. So what I do right here, I simply rely on some custom business logic. I will not dig into it, but I simply need to go through all of the stock symbols that I configure. So one by one, I will make a query. But the interesting part of this demo is how we make the query. So using the AAD HTTP client that we created before, we simply make a GET request, for example, because our API accepts a GET HTTP request, and it will provide back the stock quote of the symbol that we will request. So I simply provide the URL of the backend service that I want to use. Notice that this is a property in the list of properties that I have in my adaptive card extension. So when I say here in the UI that this is the URL of my backend quote service, this is the value that I will find in the properties of my adaptive card extension instance. And as such, I can simply dynamically build based on the settings, the URL of the backend service, and I will provide in the query string the symbol that I want to use to get the quote. Once I've done that, I will get back a JSON response, which I can convert into an actual JSON object based on a stock quote info type, which is the actual type of the result of my custom API. In your scenario, it will be your custom type. In my scenario, a stock quote info is made of few information like the string representing the symbol, the quote, which is number, the trend up or down, and the user who made the request. Why? Because I want to show you in this demo how we can also get the security context of the user invoking the backend API. In fact, whenever I make a request to my backend function, I also get back who is the user making the request so that we can see practically how we can get access to the information about who is the user making the request. So back to my load quote function or method, I simply get back the stock info object and I use it to configure the state of my adaptive card extension. As we already saw in some of the other demos in these SIG calls, once I have the state configured in my adaptive card extension, I can use it, for example, in the rendering of a card view, which is precisely what I'm doing right here. So I have a card view, which is the one we see in the UI of the adaptive card. And in the card view, we render as the primary text the symbol. And as the description, we read the state trend to see if we are going up or down, and we render accordingly the arrow. And then we render the quote value, which will be in US dollars. So that's the client-side part of the story, together with the package solution.json file in which I configure that my application requires to have access to the stock quote function app with the permission scope called read.stockquote. So I'm declaring that my SPFx solution requires to consume this API with this specific permission scope. I create a package, I upload the package in the app catalog, which is something that we can do right now. Actually, my solution is already running, but I will do it again just for the sake of completeness. So if I drag and drop this application and I replace it in the app catalog, we can see that this application is going to consume an external API, and we will need to grant proper permissions to this application. And of course, this is the demo effect, so I don't see the dialog right now, but at the very end, in the advanced section API access of my SharePoint Admin Center, I will be able to grant in the list of pending requests, or to see that I already granted, like I already did in my scenario, the stock quote function app application. I granted the SharePoint framework to consume the stock quote function app backend API using the read.stockquote permission. How is built the backend API? Well, it is an Azure function that I've built using Visual Studio 2019. As I said, it is a fake one, so I don't really read the real values, but I simply provide a hard-coded value for all of the stocks because it doesn't really matter how we get the stock value. This is just for the sake of making an example. But this is a function in which I, first of all, use dependency injection to get the claim principal of the user making the request, meaning that easily and really in a straightforward way, I get inside the Azure function the claim principal of the user making the request. And when I create my response, I simply provide all of the values, including the identity.name, if any, as you can see, of the claim principal that I get as an input of the request. So how do I get inside the claims principal the identity of the user, and how can I call this API? Well, in Azure Active Directory, I registered an application in my target tenant, and this is the name of the application that I was using in SPFx in order to declare the permission request, as you can see. I declared this application, I registered it, and I decided that I wanted to expose an API. This is the unique URI of my application, and again, this is the value that we use in SPFx when we create a client through a HTTP client factory. So this is the unique URI of my exposed API, and this is the permission that I'm requesting the grant for. So I registered the application in Azure AD. Then I configured my application, my Azure Function app in Azure AD in order to work as the front end of my API. And here we are in Azure, and here we are in the Azure Function app. Here, the app could be configured either to use the authentication provided out of the box by the Azure function, which is not the case in my scenario. But if you want, you can click on the on button here and you can configure to use Azure Active Directory from the UI of the Azure function. Or you can rather want to use at low level in your function app the claims principal information and do your authorization and authentication logic in your custom code right here. It is completely up to you. I also configured, in the Azure function that I will be able to talk with the tenant, the SharePoint tenant that will consume my API. So in the course settings, I configured my function to work with the consumer under this tenant.sharepoint.com. And as such, my Azure function will be able to be accessible by the SharePoint Framework component that I defined. And in fact, if I go back here where I consume the API and I click on network, we can see that we have all of the requests for the backend API. And we can see that thanks to the AAD HTTP client factory, which created an instance of the AAD HTTP client, we also have injected in every request that will go to the backend API a bearer open authorization access token. Let me copy the value of this token. And if I will open JWT or jot.ms and copy that value, we can see that under the cover of this really unreadable value, we have inside this JOT token, we have the information that we have an open authorization token for the API with this audience. So this is the unique URI of my target API. I can see that I have the read stock quote permission, and I can see the information of the user who is going to consume the backend API. This is the token which will be provided to my backend API so that inside the API, I can have my custom logic for authentication and authorization. So really simple and straightforward. You register an API in Azure Active Directory. You configure the API to be exposed as an API with a unique URI. In the SPFx solution, in the ACE, you get a client for that specific URI. You use the REST-based approach, so you make a GET, a POST, or whatever else HTTP method you need to use to consume your target API. And you need to remember to declare in the Web API permission requests that you want to have access to that specific API accordingly to the permission model that you configure for the API itself. So that said, I think we can go back to you, Patrick. Thank you, and I hope you found it useful. Thank you.
Thank you, Paolo. Fantastic demo as always. Really great to see all those steps for connecting to an API. There's a lot to do, but Paolo laid it out very nicely and clearly there. So thank you for that wonderful demo. And thank you to Greg and Alexander for what I believe were their first demos on a call. So or one of our calls. I don't know what else they're doing. So thank you very much for that. Very much appreciate your time and effort to put those on. All great work from Greg, Alexander, and Paolo. Want to thank all of you for joining us on the call. Thank you very much for being with us here today. As always, the recording will be available in about 24 hours on our YouTube channel. You're not going to have direct access to the recording from Teams. We just can't do that of a call this size. You can follow us on Twitter at Microsoft365Dev and M365PNP. Our next Viva Connections call and SPFX call will be in 2 weeks on Thursday, April 7th at the same time. And our next M365 General Dev call will be next Thursday, March 31st at the same time. Again, all the community calls and all the other great information about the program is available at aka.ms/M365PNP. And with that, I say thank you to all of you. Have a great rest of your week and look forward to talking soon. Bye-bye.
Bye.